I absolutely hate Amber Steel Aggro. It's such an annoying deck to play against. I was getting so sick of turning up to every single store champs and playing the same deck back to back and losing just because they hit perfect curve. So I went away and I made the ultimate combination to be able to beat it. And for this, I went with Blurple. Now, don't get me wrong, there was a couple of directions that I could have went on with my build. Of course, deciding on deck colours was the main priority. I quickly realised that a tempo deck just isn't going to cut it in this meta. It's at every single store, and the problem is they tend to win in 5 turns, and for most decks, you just can't keep up with that. My instant thought was I wanted to go onto a control variant, so I started looking into Ruby Sapphire. Now, Ruby Sapphire is great because you can rely on bigger cards like Sisu to be able to wipe the board, or even B-Prep to have that panic reset button. But I found that in my testing, I just wasn't quite getting there quick enough, which is why I decided to go in the direction of Blurple. With Blurple, I'm getting ramp and I'm getting the control, but the difference is you have a lot of early on characters. With Blurple, I want to get my bigger characters out early and utilise that for my board control, and that just absolutely stomps on aggro. When making a Blurple deck, there's a couple of directions that you can go in. Of course, you can go down the basic route where you have lots of one-cost characters like Diablo, Chernabog, and Broom, but in my testing, I just found that I weren't utilising them. I didn't like them on the board. I found that without Crab, they were just basic characters that done nothing, and most of the time, if I relied on a Fox to take other cards out and swap them in, it just felt like a wasted turn, which is why I decided to go down the item route. Now, this is similar to the style that JDRR plays. I went for the Popsicle and Bell combination, and for me, when you hit this, it's just completely unbeatable. What you're aiming to do with this deck is you want to hit Popsicle on your turn 1, you get rid of the Popsicle and play your Bell for 3, and then after that you go into your ramp and you're then relying on your bigger cards like Genie, Goat or Yargo to then be able to start controlling the board. We then exert the pressure because our big carrots are coming out, we slow them down, and once they eventually run out of steam, we've got enough draw, enough cards, and enough tempo and board presence that we can take over from there. The kind of key card for me in this deck has to be Monstro without a doubt. The card is absolutely nuts, and it feels like the one key component that Blurple has been missing all this time. I played Blurple really successfully in the last set, and I took 2 store championships with it, and I absolutely loved playing it, but I found that at the end of the game, it just wasn't doing much. In early doors, it's great because it's always going to be the fastest Amethyst deck. You're the quickest to get your Genie out, so you can put a lot of pressure on the board, you can get your lore total up really high. But when it got into the later game, when you're playing against red decks or other decks that control better than you, it just felt like there was nothing that you could do. You're stuck relying on Goat trying to just edge you over the line, and most of the time you're not going to have enough steam to do it. Whereas Monstro is our big card because it allows us to clear things. Monstro, when you play him down, he has Rush, but then you can discard a card, ready him, and then go into another character, and you can keep doing this. The reason it works so well in Blurple is because we are the best draw deck in Lorcana. We have cards like Finders Keepers, Friends on the other side, which are constantly replenishing our hand. So with a really large hand, we can discard loads of cards and force Monstro to start to be our board clear, which is how it keeps us back in the game. Right, let's have a look at the deck list. Hopefully you should be able to see the deck just above me. I'm not going to go through every single count in the deck just because you can read it yourself, and we kind of want to prioritise on the cards that are useful for the Amber Steel Aggro match. Now, in this match, what's most important above anything is that you get your ramp to begin with. So we need to search for Tipo or Sail. They're the most important cards in the deck. By getting that out on the turn 2, we're able to get our turn 4 cards out way quicker, and it means we can get to Monstro a lot quicker as well, which is really essential. Ideally, for my opening turn, I am looking for Popsicle into Bell. Bell is a really nuts card, and it really does help with those aggro decks, just because she's a 3/3 stat line. She's really huge, but we need to be really careful with Bell. A lot of Blurple players fall into the trap of singing Friends with Bell, and that leaves the Amber Steel player to be able to run a Daisy into her or something other words that has high defense, and they're then able to remove damage with the Rapunzel and draw a load of cards. So something you need to be careful about when you're playing the matchup. However, realistically, if we can go Bell into Tipo, we've got enough damage on the board to be able to take out the Daisy, and we can then follow that up with Fox to be able to take out another card. At that point, if we get that combination, they tend to not be able to come back against us, which is really nice. Afterwards, we're looking for the other cards like Lady or Lawrence, or anything else that is going to be a bit of a high quester, but realistically, if you can shut that down and stop them from getting any draw from the Rapunzel, at this point I think we're going to win the game. Some other really nice cards in the deck. you'll notice there's one copy of Elsa in there, big Elsa, the 8 cost. The whole reason she's in there, and I've taken a copy of Hades out, is just to be able to help the aggro game. Hades is not that helpful if you're playing against aggro decks, so if aggro is something that you're struggling with, I'd recommend dropping your Hades by maybe 1 or 2, and then starting to run other clearing cards in there. I have considered going to a second copy of Elsa, but I just didn't want to disadvantage myself in other control matchups, for example against Ruby Sapphire, where I need to be able to get rid of the sharks. For me and my style of playing, what I think works really well is once you've cleared the early board threats, this is when we want to start the draw engine going. At this point, once I've started to get to around 5 or 6 ink, I'm going to be looking at using Finders Keepers to draw a few cards if there's not too many threats on the board, or I'm going to be going into Tamatoa. Tamatoa is probably the better option for the matchup against Amber Steel, because we can then get the Portable back, heal some of our characters, get the additional draw, but more importantly, we have the additional body on the board. After that, we can then start focusing on using cards like Elsa or Hades to clear even more, and just make sure that they can't get anywhere whilst we're questing up. In the aggro match, it tends to work that they'll get into a state where they've just ran out of cards and they can't really quest anymore, and we're just constantly popping cards. 5 cost Elsa is really nice for this, because when they're in the point of top decking and just playing down a card, we can stick her down, exert the character, rush something in and take it out. One of the kind of contentious cards in the deck for me is Yago. Yago's really good against red decks, but I just find that he sucks against anything that's steel. The main reason for this is because the vanish effect. Whenever he's targeted by an action, he just disappears straight away, which isn't really good for us. And when you're going against steel decks which are relying on songs, it's a little bit more problematic. Of course, with Ruby Amethyst, they can rely on cards like Pan Shadowfinder to be able to give Yago rush, and then he becomes really useful straight away as a rush evasive character. We don't have that luxury in Blurple. I did try using Pan Shadowfinder in Blurple, but it just didn't fit too well, mainly because it was a free cost and we skip our turn 3. So if you are wanting to play that style and go Pan into Yago, I think you'd have to play Ruby Amethyst. But unfortunately, I don't think Ruby Amethyst is strong enough into Amber Steel Aggro, especially when you're on the draw. Now, you might be thinking, yes, this is a great answer to Amber Steel Aggro, but what do I do for the other top decks in the meta? And the good thing is, Blurple's in a really strong position at the minute, because it just tends to do well into everything. The whole point of Blurple, and really a lot of Amethyst decks, is they don't really have a weak matchup. Don't get me wrong, Blurple sucks against traditional Steel Song. It's a really hard matchup, but there is cards that you can tech in for that. You'll see in my previous videos where I talked about Emerald Amethyst, a lot of the time I was teching in the big Ursula Sea Witch Queen to be able to combat against the Steel Song decks, and she works really well in Blurple as well. Last set, I ran 2 of her in my Blurple deck, and she was really clutch to shut down Steel Song, because cards can't sing when she's on the board, and their deck just falls apart when they can't do that. Some of the other decks that you need to look out for when you're playing with Blurple is Ruby Sapphire. It can be a bit of a 50-50 matchup, and it tends to be whoever's on the play will win that match. The one thing I don't like is I've had to drop Manners from my Blurple list, just because there's so much aggro around. With Manners, I feel very confident that I can beat the Ruby Saph matchup, because I can use Hades to get rid of their shark, that gets rid of any of their action gaining Lord strategy, and then also we've got Monstro to be able to take out their Manners, which is really nice. We can then rely on our own Manners to be able to go straight past them. But because I've had to take them out, if we don't find the answers for their shark straight away, they can get some quick lore very quickly. The other issue that we have is a lot of the time we want to be playing Genie against the red decks, and then they can hit down CC, which wipes out our Genie straight away. We're not really getting any of the value for Genie if we can't quest them. So it is still a winnable matchup, but a little bit dependent on who's going first. Also, on top, we have Emerald Amethyst. I've not seen as much Emerald Amethyst lately, and a lot of it's going into the discard route, but I think this is quite a good matchup for us. I really don't like playing Emerald Amethyst discard into Blurple, mainly because our whole discard strategy doesn't work against a deck that only draws. Against decks like that, you just want to ramp as quickly as possible and then make sure you're hitting all your card draw. Once you can go into repeated Finders Keepers or Friends or Tamatoas, it's going to be really hard for them to keep up in the game because they just don't do much. The other advantage you've got is, I would say, Blurple is always going to win against another purple deck, because you can get to the cards they want a lot quicker than they can. You hit your ramp straight away, Genie coming out straight away is so hard to deal with, and if you go into multiple Genies, it's going to be really difficult for people to start to control that board, especially if they don't have a lot in the evasive package. Right, so that's the list altogether. Hope you guys like it. If you do want to have a go running it in the final set champs, make sure to drop a comment and let me know. We've done really, really well on the channel lately. I said that I wanted to end July with a total of 80 subscribers. We've absolutely smashed that. We've made it all the way to 93, which I'm beyond thankful for. So for all you that have subscribed and are tuned into all my videos, thank you very much. It's muchly appreciated. For those of you that haven't subscribed, do it now. No, stop. Subscribe button. Yes, you. Do it. Subscribe, please. Yeah, thank you. Much better.